What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. When I was doing most of my research for the What Gnar Could Have Been video that I released a couple days ago, an interesting character actually popped up. A lot of people thought he was supposed to be Gnar, or that this character eventually became Gnar, which is why he was talked about a lot in the same places that Gnar was, but Riot confirmed that this character always, from day one, was something totally different, and the only similarity that it had with Gnar was that they both happened to be YORDLEs. Apart from that, this character did not influence or result in Gnar in any way, shape, or form. They were totally separate projects. But I'm left wondering, should Riot release a YORDLE jungler? Let's get started. Now this character is one that was described, as I'm sure you can tell from the title of this video, as being a YORDLE who was a jungler. In 2013, a couple of players were asking for a YORDLE jungler to be released since there were no YORDLE junglers, and champion designer Riot Ezreal said that barring unforeseen circumstances, that YORDLE jungler champion would be released in the next year. Well, 2014 went by and so did 2015, but there's a lot of interesting information surrounding this character. I wasn't able to find a name, so I have to refer to him as simply a YORDLE jungler or the YORDLE jungler. Anyway, Gnar happened to be in development around 2013 during the same time that the YORDLE jungler began development, and during that time the writers stated that they were looking to do another YORDLE quite soon, as it had been about a year and a half since the previous YORDLE was released, which happened to be Lulu. Gnar would go on to get finalized and take the place of that YORDLE slot, and as a result, the champion design team didn't want to release another YORDLE for probably about a year or so. However, it's been about a year and a half since Gnar's release, so it's about the time gap from Lulu to Gnar as it is from Gnar to today, and no YORDLes have been released since Gnar. There's definitely a slot for a new YORDLE champion to exist, and this YORDLE jungler would potentially be a unique character. As for the story of the development of this YORDLE jungler, he began development in 2013 and started out with the idea of being this fighter, or maybe a bruiser, who would function primarily in the jungle, with the idea that his character would be mostly unique, since there are no YORDLes that were designed for the jungle so far in League of Legends. Although his character concept proved to be solid and fleshed out, his gameplay kit was a different story, as although they tested a bunch of different designs, it was difficult for the team to find a gameplay hook that was satisfying, and they struggled to give this champion a purpose and a gameplay theme that really fit in nicely. And most of the team agreed that although this fighter champion sounded super cool on paper, it didn't really work out when prototyped in their game testing. Unfortunately, I don't have too much information on what some of his abilities might have been, since Riot kind of likes to keep most of those things private in case they want to reuse the abilities in the future. However, I do have one ability that was potentially in the kit of this YORDLE jungler. This ability was his ultimate ability, and it would create a tunnel that could be used to travel a set distance. However, this tunnel was also able to be used by his allies, so it gave you a lot of playmaking and initiation power or escapes. It seemed like a super versatile ability that could be quite interesting. However, this ability, as well as the entire gameplay kit of the YORDLE jungler, ended up not working out at all, unfortunately. Eventually, as they couldn't find a kit for the YORDLE jungler's gameplay, his entire concept would go on to be cancelled, and the idea of the champion would be shelved, with the idea that although it had potential, it wasn't something they could make work, and would maybe revisit in the future with some fresh ideas. That ultimate ability that created a tunnel that his allies could use would go on to be given to one of the early development cycles of Rek'Sai. And Rek'Sai for a time during her development had that ability to create tunnels that her allies could use, similar to how her current tunnels function today, but with allies being able to use them as well. Although it was an interesting concept, it proved to be way too overpowered on a basic ability, and they didn't want to make Rek'Sai's tunnels her ultimate, since their entire theme was being designed around the concept of creating a bunch of tunnels around the map and burrowing all over the place. So once again, the gameplay concepts of the YORDLE jungler proved to be unsuccessful, further adding to the explanation of why it was cancelled. They did agree that his character design and story were super cool, and they really liked the art and the theme that they had going for him. It's likely that he involves some form of digging maybe he was like a YORDLE digger, if you consider the design of that potential ultimate he might have had. So maybe his character was based off of like a mole or something like that, but the concept of a jungler who influences allies and can help them travel around to make plays across the map is one that could be super sweet, and would be an awesome take on the jungle role. And the reason why a lot of the information that I have on him is kind of vague, or I guess like scattered and incomplete, is because the writers who worked on him are quoted for saying that although his gameplay hook proved to be much more difficult to make satisfying than they had initially predicted or hoped for, they still really loved his art and his theme for the design of the YORDLE jungler, so they will almost certainly give it a shot another day. So although he did happen to be cancelled, it's clear that he's not like a lot of the other cancelled champions, and that he almost certainly will be revisited in the future. A big part of the way that Riot likes to design champions is that they start with some sort of concept or idea that the designers really like, and then they work off of that and then keep the stuff that they like and then trim away the fat, so to speak. And a big part of what they really liked about this character was his art design and his theme. So when he is brought back, he's going to remain the character that is a YORDLE jungler, almost certainly. And because of that, and because of the release of Gnar, the development slot for a YORDLE jungler wasn't really available for a long time. Riot's champion releases very much stick to a cycle almost. It's not a strict schedule per se, but it's more of a time frame like, oh, we haven't done this type of character in this amount of time, so we want to do one. And one of the types of characters that are limited by that design cycle are YORDLEs. They like to use this type of development cycle in order to keep the cast of characters diverse and interesting, and as a result they don't want to release YORDLEs too frequently, otherwise they start to take too big of the spotlight in the entire crew of champions. And since Gnar was released, another YORDLE wouldn't be possible to create for probably about a year most likely after Gnar. And so for the longest time they had many reasons to not revisit the design of this YORDLE jungler, and maybe only 1 or 2 reasons to potentially revisit him. However, as we began 2016 and progressed further into the year, those reasons, those limitations of the development cycle of champions are pretty much gone now that it's been a year and a half since the most recent YORDLE release. And as a result, I'd really like to see this concept of a YORDLE jungler revisited. Although some of his kit was attempted in Rek'Sai, it wasn't used in the final version of her kit, so it's still available to use, and this idea of the YORDLE jungler could be pretty awesome. The last champion we had that was a jungler was Kindred, although she was kind of designed as more of a marksman primarily that just ended up being so awesome as a jungler. And she really was the exception to the development cycle limitations since she just ended up being such an awesome champion. The last champion that we had that was actually intended to fit the jungler slot ended up being Rek'Sai, who was released in December 2014, which again means that the slot of the development cycle for a jungler is potentially available. So although there were a lot of complications during his development, and it's unclear if this is an idea that can be brought to life, it does show a lot of potential and it's a better time than ever to make that happen for sure. So what do you think? Should Riot release a YORDLE jungler? Leave a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you didn't hit that dislike, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.